Hi guys. I don't know where to look because I'm using my front-facing camera, so if it looks like I'm looking at myself, it's because I don't know where to look. Oh well. Welcome to our last week of Ruth. We are in fact a week late. I know so many of you wait for these videos and I appreciate your patience. It's hard. We're gonna look into next year when we start our new study. Whitney and I are gonna work together to break apart those weeks and try and pre-record some, but then we've also kind of toyed with the idea of bringing one of you in every once in a while and having you with us. So if that's something you would want to be a part of, let me know. It's not, this frame is kind of weird, yeah? I feel very far away. Hold on. It's like angling weird. Sorry if this makes you like nauseous. Okay, I just have to like sit up and closer to you, I think. Okay. Anyway, so kind of toyed with the idea of bringing you guys, one of you each week. So we'll see. I don't know yet, but anywho, regardless, we're so glad you're here. I'm so glad that these videos are helpful. At our last meeting, I did kind of joke around and say, like, if they're not helpful, let me know. But you guys seem to really like them. And I think that it kind of keeps you accountable. Like, it's like, okay, I have to do my reading this week because I have to watch the video. So hopefully it has helped you in that way or helped you understand what you're reading if things have been a little difficult to understand. Anywho, let's make this quick because my phone has a very minimal storage. And I also cannot. I don't like being able to see myself when I film because I just like constantly fix my hair and stuff, but oh well. Okay. Chapter 4. If you have a book, if you have one of the Ruth books, we are starting on page 77 all the way through to the end. So all of chapter 4. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not like going into this with all these notes. I'm just going to show you, I'm going to walk through what I put in my Bible and then we're going to walk through some of the questions. So if I don't talk about something, it's not because it's not important. It's just because I didn't write it down. I have a note in here. Okay, we'll get to that. All right, so in chapter 4, we start by seeing that Boaz went. So my very first note is that Boaz didn't do anything else once Ruth came to him and said, like, I need a redeemer. He didn't send her out and then go to work and be like, okay, I'll get to it. No, the next thing he did is it says Boaz went. So I just circled that word because I think it's another reminder of how our Redeemer is not sitting around. He's like, he has gone out and is making a way. And that's what Boaz did for Ruth. Next, let's see. We see down at verse 4, the other Redeemer. So at this point, Boaz is going to the other Redeemer because he is in line first to redeem Ruth. And when Boaz explains the situation, the other Redeemer is very quick to say, I want to redeem it. And then he finds out the cost. And the cost being having to take in Ruth and Naomi. So that's, he says, I want to redeem it. And then Boaz says, on the day you buy the field from Naomi, you will acquire Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of a deceased man, to perpetuate the man's name on this property. And the other Redeemer immediately says, just kidding, I can't redeem it. And so we just see that there was a cost in redeeming Ruth, and Boaz was willing to pay the cost. Whereas this other Redeemer, as soon as he learned about that cost, it wasn't worth it to him. And you guys know I'm going to relate that back to our own Redeemer. And there was a price that had to be paid for our lives. And we were worth the price to Jesus. So we were worth the price to our Savior. So let's see. Oh, my little note here. Oh, it's literally what we just talked about. It says the other redeemer was quick to want the land, because when you redeem, you would like get the land that belonged to the deceased husband. He was quick to want the land until he learned the cost, which was caring for Ruth and Naomi. Boaz was selfless to take on their cost. You are not too costly for Jesus. He says that you are worth redeeming. So there's that note. Apparently that stuck out to me. Comes with praise. I have a note that says, look at 1 Corinthians 6:20. I know exactly what this is going to say. For you were bought at a price, so glorify God with your body. So it's another, the New Testament also confirms that redemption cost something. Not just back then, but also today. So, cool. Okay. So then they go through this whole situation where they have to take off the sandal and buy the property back for yourself. It's like this whole ritual thing they have to do back in that time to make the transaction official. And then it says, all the people who were at the city gate, including the elders, says, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is entering your house like Rachel and Leah. And I put a note here, and I wish I remembered where the note came from. I'm sure it came out of our book. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So the witnesses prayed that God would bless Ruth like he blessed Rachel and Leah, because it was through Rachel and Leah and the 13 children that God would build the family of his chosen people. The people were praying that God would build Israel through Ruth. And then, of course, little did they know just how miraculously God would answer that question or that prayer. So when I wrote in here, the people were prayed that Israel would be built through Ruth. It's not that the people were just praying that she would be blessed and that, her life would be fruitful, but specifically when it says, like Rachel and Leah, they are specifically praying that the people of God would be built up through her, just as it was through Rachel and Leah. And then we get down to our genealogy. So we're looking at, in verse 14, it says, the woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you without a family redeemer today. And then also, like we've talked about through this whole thing, is we are also not left without a redeemer. He will renew your life and sustain you. And then as we read on down, we see this genealogy of Ruth's life. I'm going to read in verse 17. The neighbor women said, a son has been born to Naomi, and they named him Obed. And he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And as we know, David was then in the bloodline of Jesus. So this whole time we've been reading Ruth, we see this picture of our Redeemer through Boaz as the family Redeemer. But we also get the reminder of how God can use ordinary people. Not only can God use ordinary people, but God can use people that were at one point in life not for him. Remember, Ruth was a Moabite woman. She had to convert to Christianity, to the religion that Naomi was. And we saw that in chapter 1, verse 16 and 17. We see her conversion. And God uses her. God never said, you were not good enough. You took too long to find me. Your past is too bad. You've been through too many bad things. You've done too many bad things. God used her and Naomi to ultimately bring about the Messiah many years later. So let's look at, I want to make sure there's no notes in this section in my Bible. Give me 1 second. I'm going to read this one note. It's kind of along the lines of what we just talked about. It says, God turned around the lives of Ruth and Naomi. Naomi was bitter towards God. Ruth was widowed and alone, but God had bigger plans for them. God can turn things around and make something out of nothing, and make good out of bad, and somebody out of nobody. So that is the stuff that I have specifically written in my Bible. I need to tape this in at some point. Okay, let's look at our book really quick. Whoops. And talk about any questions we might have. Okay, the first question I feel like we can talk about is, what is the cost of following Jesus? And we can talk about this next time we meet, but the cost of following Jesus is, we cost him everything. It cost him his life to redeem us, and it cost us our life to follow him. It says we are to die to ourselves, take off our flesh, and live through the Holy Spirit. So in my mind, when it says, what is the cost of following Jesus? The cost for me is like laying down my cross, like laying down my pride, laying down the things that I want, the plans that I have, and picking up the cross that Jesus has for me, picking up the plans that Jesus has for me. That's everything. But there's hope in that, because sometimes that can feel like, I don't want to lay down everything I've ever known and loved. But we have confidence through the word that everything God has in store is far better than what we thought we could have in store. And we kind of see that a lot in Ruth too, with how Elimelech makes the decision for his family to flee Bethlehem and go to Moab. And we see the consequences of him doing that was his life. And we talked about this in our meeting the other day. But when we're walking outside of God's plan, we're not under that. We're not under his wing. We're not under that protection. And, so following God might cost us everything, but it gives us his plan. It's that obedience gives us our protection, and it gives us what he has promised to be better. But walking in our own plan only gives us what the world can promise us, which isn't very much in comparison to what God has in store. Let's see. Think about the things that God has redeemed in your life. If there's anything specific you want to share, you can share that. When I think about things God has redeemed in my life, I think about my own personal relationship with God. And I grew up in the church, so I've always had a relationship. Well, always, like when I was like 5, I accepted Christ. But that relationship, God has pursued my heart for 25 years. And when I feel like I've fallen away, or when I've gone through a season of being angry at God, he's redeemed that. He's covered it in grace and given me new life through him. Let's see what else we got. Okay, 2 questions from this page. How have you seen God's faithfulness in unlikely circumstances? And I wrote down, it's hard to see God's faithfulness when you're in the midst of the unlikely circumstance. I can tell you that I didn't feel God's faithfulness when I was going through the hard season, but I can look back and see God's faithfulness now. Now that I've lived it, worked through it, and I'm removed from it, I can look back and see it. And that, we again talked about this on Monday night, going through those unlikely circumstances, those hard times, it's what draws you closer to God. It's what grows your faith, because now when I go through harder things, I can look back and I can say, even though I didn't feel God's faithfulness then, I know he was being faithful. I can see it now. So now that I'm in a hard season again, I can trust that God's going to be faithful because he's done it before. And then also it says, Jesus gave up everything for us. What might he be asking you to give up to serve him more? This kind of goes back to surrender and dying to yourself, but specifically what in your life is God maybe asking you to let go of so that you can serve him more? For me, I wrote down my idea of what I should be doing. So my time really is what I feel like God wants me to, God is like teaching me to say no. And it's learning how to discern what to say yes to and what to say no to. That's really hard for me right now. And so my idea of what I should be doing might not be the idea of what God has planned for me. So figuring that out. Discernment is so hard. If you're not praying for discernment, start praying for discernment. Every single day, I'm like, Jesus, help me be obedient to your plan, even when I don't know what I'm being obedient to. I did see, I think I shared this. I'm having deja vu right now. One time somebody told me that, did I already say all of this? This is so weird. I'm having so much deja vu right now. My dog's gonna bark. Okay, stop. Somebody told me one time that if you're having deja vu, this is probably hocus pocus stuff, but it means that God is like confirming that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, that you're in the place he wants you to be in. Anyway, all of that to say, one time I saw this quote, and I may have shared this with you guys before, but it said, if you are too busy to foster your relationship with God, then you are more busy than God ever intended you to be. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because when I wake up in the morning, my life is on go. I'm like, how can I get Evie to school quicker? How can I get home and start working immediately? It's not wake up and how can I get in my Bible first? And I'm working on that. That's something I'm working on. It's something I did today. I came home and I caught myself going into my office to start my workday without having opened my Bible, without having spent time in prayer. So if you are too busy to foster your relationship with God through time in the Word, through prayer, through worship, through community, through service, if you are too busy to foster your relationship with God, you are more busy than God ever intended you to be. That's deep. That's not from me. I don't know where I found that, but if I find the source, I'll share the source. Okay. What should your response be to God's faithfulness? So when we recognize God's faithfulness, even when it's hard to recognize God's faithfulness, what should your response look like? For me, I wrote down pouring my own faithfulness back out to him. I think we have to be careful because our faithfulness to God shouldn't be reliant on feeling and seeing his faithfulness to us, because sometimes it is hard to feel and see. But we're promised he's a good God. So I think it's about trust. I think, while it's great to feel God's faithfulness and to see it while you're in the midst of a hard situation, it also is a matter of, God, even when I can't feel you, I know you're here. But a response to his faithfulness, I would say, is to be faithful back, to desire more of a relationship with him. I think, oh, one more. Okay, last question we'll talk about. I'll give you my answer, and then I would love to know y'all's thoughts. What aspect of God's character stood out to you most in the study of Ruth? I wrote down his sovereignty, his ability to be working in ways that I don't even know, and it's all for the good of his plan and his kingdom. Ruth had no idea what God would do with her life. Naomi had no idea. In fact, Naomi had no expectation that God was going to work in her life because she felt he had turned his face away from her. But he did, because he's sovereign and he's almighty. He knows what is happening before it happens. He knows what's going to happen before it gets the chance to even start to happen. You know, he knows our life far, far ahead than we do. I shouldn't read this verse. I should save this for when I'm speaking on this verse later in a few weeks, but, you know, every time I talk about this now, I come back to this verse. God knew so long ago, like, God knew you would walk through this hard season, not just before you were conceived. Like, he knew it before the concept of you was formed, and like, it just blows my mind. Ephesians 1:4 says, "For he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, to be holy and blameless in love before him." Like, God knew you before creation. God knew you before he made the world. That's crazy. Oh, that's wild. Like, and that's, I think, what from Ruth, for me, is like the biggest characteristic of God I take away is that they had no clue the depth of God's plan. Yeah. Gosh. It just gives me so much joy. I love it. And it's so nice. I recorded this morning. It's like it's 10 a.m. and now I get to go all day feeling like this, which is so nice. Okay. Anyway, thanks for joining us for Ruth. We had a great time in the book of Ruth. I hope you got a lot out of it. We have our last meeting of the year is the third Monday of November. I want to say it's November 18th. I cannot check because I'm recording on my phone. So, it is a holiday party. So come ready for some games and to get to know each other. And if you are able to bring a sweet or a salty, we will have kind of like potluck style, not necessarily dinner, but like it'll probably be enough to be your dinner. So I hope to see you guys there 7 p.m. And we will be in the kids' life room, not in the multi-purpose room. We'll be in the kids' life area. So yay. All right, guys. Bye.